So please join me in welcoming our next speaker, Dr. Michael Liebmann.
Honored guests, I feel very humbled to be here with you today. One of the last panels said, scaling companies, attracting money, exiting profitably. But if we want to do that, we have to have one thing before, the assets, the deal flow. And I'm a builder. I build companies, and that's what I came to do in Vietnam. And I want to give you the builder perspective. When I came to Vietnam 2 years ago, I just exited my last venture in Germany. And I came here and asked myself, what is the next big thing? And I wanted to learn. I took a year and spoke with hundreds of people. I went to Da Nang, Hanoi. I went to the factories in Binh Duong, Long An, Dong Nai. And I wanted to learn and see how it works. I also taught startup classes at FPT University. I wanted to get in touch with the next generation and see how we can build this future for Vietnam. And I think for a builder, the next 10 years will be fantastic. I think the next 10 years can be Vietnam's decade of AI. The country is on the path to become a $1 trillion economy, and I believe this is faster with AI. The question that I'm asking is, how can we accelerate and how can we reach independence and sovereignty in AI? And I split this into 3 parts. Will we depend on foreign AI? Where can Vietnam win? And how? How are we going to do that? Because I think we haven't spoken about this enough today. Will we depend on foreign AI? OpenAI has leaked their supposedly budgets for training their artificial intelligence. This year it's about $30 billion. That's training, that's not distributing the AI. 60 billion next year and over 100 billion in a few years. Anthropic is a little bit less, but in the same ballpark. Who can follow that? Who can challenge that? Will we depend forever on these 2 companies? And I think there is a perspective. That's Asia's push for open source. 7 out of the top 10 performing open source labs, AI labs, are in Asia, mostly in China. But are these labs, are these open source models any good? Well, open source is interesting, right? Because you can take that model and put it on your own machine and give it to your customers. Well, if these models are any good, we have to develop, or we have to understand by comparing their performance. And you remember 2 years ago, there was the DeepSeek moment where OpenAI just announced just launched their first reasoning model. And a few months later, DeepSeek, a lab that no one has ever heard before, came out of nowhere and challenged that performance. And most of the indicator, the performance was actually quite similar. But what was more important is that the tokens were significantly cheaper. This says 27 times cheaper. So this sort of proves that open source labs can actually challenge the frontier labs, hopefully, or let's find out if they can continue to do this. But they have one very important thing. Because they are open source, their return on invest for the tokens that we buy from them has to be significantly better for us. That's why these models are cheaper. So this helps us to develop applications earlier with cheaper tokens in areas where AI or tokens were too expensive. But I think the other element of open source AI labs is developing more efficient cognitive architectures. Because if you look at the GPT technology, it's actually quite inefficient. Just to predict the next word, just one word, it has millions of matrix operations. But we already know that there are self-learning techniques and mechanics in nature that are much better. It's this one, right? Not just my brain, everyone's. So we can see that there is a path where the ROI of the token becomes more and more important for the open source labs to keep challenging the closed source labs that put tens of billions of dollars into that. So Where does that leave Vietnam? Open source opens the door for Vietnam's AI independence. We already see providers putting open source models onto Vietnamese machines and servers, running high performance models here in Vietnam. Viettel is partnering with NVIDIA with their Liebmann open source model and bringing Vietnamese language and legal applications, applications for security and government, and we'll see more of that in the future. But what I find even more interesting is a new trend of small vertical models. These are models that only have a few billion parameters. You can train them faster and much cheaper. And this is an opportunity for younger, earlier labs that we can build here in Vietnam. And the more the technology advances, the cheaper it will become to build these models, for example, for medical or for computer vision. So we will have our own high-performance models, and we will very likely have our vertical models that are high-performing but much cheaper to train. So Vietnam does not have to depend until the end of time on OpenAI or Anthropic. All right. Where can Vietnam win now? Where do we get the assets from that we want to invest in? Where do we build what is fun to build and where it's promising to create profits? I think for that, it's very important for us to remind ourselves where the strengths of Vietnam is. We have iterated this today. A growing manufacturing sector, a dedicated government, and a strong geopolitical positioning, bringing in the demand. But I want to stress the talent sector. Vietnam's STEM and IT graduates are growing, soon reaching over 100,000 per year. And at the same time, the young graduates are extremely drawn towards AI. Vietnam is among the top 10 countries to adopt AI for workers and for students. And I've seen this because I teach in class. So we basically have the raw talent and it is willing. Now we have to put them to work. And where should we do that? For me, this is really a three-stage process. What is Vietnam different in, and what do we need in order to create a resilient AI economy and drive up that GDP growth? Let's go into the first stage. Each of these stages build on top of each other. The first one for me is AI upskilled workforce. What is that? Well, when we open up our Twitter or social media, we always see these news, something just broke something, and new bot comes out and does sales and marketing for you very easily. Legal AIs, document processing. Those AI applications are white-collar focused. And there's no wonder because the American economy is an economy of white collars. But when we look at Vietnam, 53 million workforce, 50% of that is blue collar, construction, manufacturing, logistics. And if we count in if we count in farming, that's 70% not white collar. So here is a very good angle for us to develop applications that focus on actual physical work. What does it mean? I want to give you an example. Picture a machine operator in a plastic factory in Binh Duong. There's a lot over there. The injection mold machine stops working. What does the operator do? Everything plugged in? Everything fine? Cannot solve the problem, has to call the technician. Technician doesn't have time, maybe it's at night or it's busy at something else. So we have a production loss of a couple of hours. If that machine operator has a co-pilot, either in a phone or maybe even in the glasses one day, will diagnose the problem himself, maybe even be able to solve it, do maintenance, optimize the processing, have a higher machine uptime, maybe better quality, better output. That is upskilling of low-level labor. If we focus this on the blue-collar work, then this will have a huge impact on Vietnam. We can do this in construction, in logistics, in some of the farming fields. Now, what is the economic impact of that? Well, there are models for this. If you make a scenario on which sectors you can upskill, what are the adoption rates, and how much productivity uplift you can have, you can come up with a number. And I dare to create a model. And the numbers of a couple of models are actually fairly similar. I see an economic uplift of 25 to 35 billion per year in a few years, probably post 2030. But that's visible in the GDP, and that's Vietnam specific. This is what we're doing here for our workforce. Now, what do we do after we scale up the blue collars? That's physical AI. And we just have seen the semiconductor discussion panel, and I'm very glad for Dr. Kung to mention that we need the talent. Because if we want to build robot arms that help automating low-level tasks, drones, and maybe even for dual use for security and defense, because our European friends want to produce the drones somewhere, we not only have to have the chips. Every chip is only as good as the application and the developer ecosystem that sits on top of that chip. So this becomes another builder opportunity, taking the chips, embedding them in hardware, and building the solutions on top of that. We have the people, we have the raw talent. We need to guide them there. Later we'll talk about how we get there. The economic impact here is difficult to capture, but I guess we can capture a part of the global market for robots and drones, which is projected to go to like $500 billion over the next 10 years. Whatever that number is, but a few percentages of that will be visible in our GDP. On top of that, Vietnam needs these automations anyway if we want to go into the next decade of AI. So it has actually two benefits: export and automating our own production. So now we've talked about upskilling blue-collar labor, adding physical AI for the automation. What's left? That's the intelligence. I believe that we'll have a good opportunity to build small vertical models on the most critical data that we have in Vietnam. We don't need to send our data abroad, have people interpret it, solve the problems for us, and then we pay the tokens to send it back. We can do this here. And this is also a great builder opportunity. Of course, people are working on this, but it's not enough at the moment. Critical data is banking, healthcare, security, government, some parts of manufacturing. Capturing the economic uplift out of this is difficult. Probably we can save a few $1 billion per year, not paying the tokens abroad, but spending the money inside the country. That's a GDP impact. But a more indirect effect is all the applications and their value add they have for the economy. That's what we don't see here in the numbers, and it's very hard to predict. But all these three stages combined make up a significant acceleration of the GDP. And it serves us in a way that Vietnam becomes very resilient and a strong player in the AI game. And for me personally, what we're working on, what we're doing, there's a lot of opportunity to build companies around this. This is what excites me. How are we going to do that? Well, we have to look at the AI world, and we find out that the layers that exist, the model layer, the harnesses, and the applications, most of the companies that drive this growth and the innovation here are young companies. Of course, in the foundational models, these are very experienced founders with a lot of capital. All right, but even if you talk about the harnesses and the application level, these are really literally young companies, like less than 5 years old. And several of the main founders come directly out of university. And that's good news, because we don't need MNCs, multinational corporations, to drive this change for us and with us. It's helpful, it's good to have this. But what's more important is to nurture a culture of founders. So how do we get there? How are founders made? When we look at the largest institutions to generate unicorns and successful startups on a regular basis, we have Stanford, the StartX program, and our advisor from DreamLab came out of this program. They produced over 800, maybe 1,000 successful startups, 28 unicorns, hundreds of billions of dollars of valuation. In Munich, the CDTM, which I was part of as a mentor, tried to copy this method. Now there are up to 300 successful startups, 9 unicorns. And then we have in China, at Zhejiang University, the ITP, the Intensive Training Program, with over 100 startups and 3 unicorns already. And from that universities, the founders of DeepSeek and Alibaba also came from. Can we find a pattern? Is there something that we can learn here to copy and make us more successful in how we create founders, to generate the deal flow for us as investors? These programs are very different from one another. Some are shorter, some are longer, the way they drive the candidates through the program. But they have one thing in common. That one thing is the high quality funnel. Thousands of people at the top that want to be part of this, that are attracted into these programs. Hundreds that go through and a few dozen that make it. And even if you don't make it, it's a life learning experience. You're going to be more successful at your jobs. We need these high quality funnels in Vietnam. How do we build them? Now we have more organizations coming in like Block 71, Plug and Play, others. I think we are on an interesting path, but we need to analyze how we can finally build such a high quality funnel fast. And for that, we need to take a look at the funnel. The bottom of this funnel, the blue area, that's not the problem. That's what we have in this room. They're the mentors, the industry leaders, the physical programs, the capital, right? The growth stories that might start from that point. That's great. That's all here. This is you guys. What's hard to scale is the top of the funnel. If we want to have 100 startups, and I believe the number that you mentioned in your report was 76 early stage deals last year reported until 3 million. 76. That's not a lot. So we have to find a way how to scale this. How do you scale this? The answer is simple. It's AI. I believe that the next founders will work together with AI co-founders. And they help them to ideate, create new value, learn from their mistakes faster, go through structured programs, get the confidence on how to act like a serial founder, make the mistakes faster, self-learning mechanisms and AI agents that run these programs. If we help the programs in the country to get this, we'll be significantly faster in creating such a high quality funnel. And out of a sudden, this becomes even iterative, like a product. This is what we're building at DreamLab. Humans and mentors and funding are still needed. This is what we need at the bottom. So now, to come to an end, the 4 pillars on how to get there. I think this room is a manifestation of regulation, industry, and capital working together. Many of the items here have been discussed already today. This is underway. But I want to stress the focus on nurturing the talent. Dr. Kung has said this in the panel before. We need to add the program. Some universities have more. We need to bring in AI. We need to nurture the culture for people to fail faster and learn faster. And then we need to create the hero stories so that thousands of people enter this path and try it out. And if we do this, I believe Vietnam's decade of AI will happen over the next 10 years. And I believe that the next wave of AI products will not be bought from the US or from China. These AI products will be built here in Vietnam. Thank you.